Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Military Spouses Edition with Stephanie and Ashley. I am really excited for this one. I mean, last week was a powerful one. It was a big one. All over our guys in PTSI and the support that we can give them and how to be that support for them. But Ash, this is an episode that I feel like I get fired up about. And this is the idea of our spousal PTSI. And I know that you and I have talked many times over this. But this is an episode that I think because I have had not the best experiences with it, I get fired up about it. But what has been your experience with the PTSI on your end?
First of all, my thoughts they're kind of all over the place because I have so many thoughts on this topic. It's going to be hard for me to organize them all, but I will try my best. However, this topic to me, I wish I'd known before. Like what all the things that I was feeling. So yes, I get a little heated too, just for like the lack of information flow on this topic, and maybe it wasn't even there. Maybe they were still studying it. I don't know, but just for the the lack of, support that we had, the lack of information, the lack of understanding of even what it was that I was feeling, just gets me a little miffed a bit. So yeah, I'm with you on that because, it's something that we struggled with, that we had no idea what it was.
And it's like, I look at it and go, it's a silent battle, because I remember you walk in and everybody tells you knew what you signed up for. Like you hear this all the time of, you signed up for this, deal with it. This is what and they talk about the guys coming home differently, but they never talk about how, as a spouse, you're going to be changed. Like you're going to come home with things. You're going to be different. Things are going to be different for you, and how little that information was relayed. Like I remember so well, granted, Chris signed up in 08, 09. He deployed in 10. And so I remember hearing all of this, like, he's going to come home differently. Are you prepared? How to prepare yourself for them? And so I was well aware, like, I signed up for the military. I'm getting, the man I married is probably not going to be the same man who leaves. Like, I get that. I was ready and willing to accept that and love him. But I didn't understand how much that would play a part on me, and how much the woman who walked in as his support was going to not be the same woman who walked out of the military, and how much that would look different. And I have to say, it was hard. That was probably one of the hardest things to ever accept, because I think I sat there and was like, well, I can't deal with me having issues when he's got issues too. Like we can't both be down. So I need to suck up my issues, put them aside because his are bigger than mine. And
right.
Yet I wasn't dealing with it either. Like you've got two hurt people sitting in a room. One's not talking. One is trying their best to support when they don't even know what they're going through. You're like, this is a mess. And yet I remember going to doctors' offices, and I would talk to spouses. I would talk to doctors. I was very hush about it, though, especially when he came home, was that I was like, I feel like I'm going insane. And people would look at me like I was. They were like, there's no such thing as spousal PTSI. And I was like, okay, so if I talk to too many people or to the wrong person, they're going to take my kids. Like, this is what I literally thought. I was going insane. Because everybody looked at me like I was crazy. This wasn't a thing. Spouses didn't get PTSI. You're just losing it. Like, you're just an overwhelmed mom, is what I continue to get the, like, almost like the sympathy pat of like, you're just an overwhelmed mom. And I'm like, no, like I don't feel like that. I'm not an overwhelmed mom, but yet at the same time, you're like, why do I feel insane right now?
Yeah, or it was like to add to what you just said, or it's like, oh, this is normal. You're just living like you are in that stage of a young mom and you have your kids and you have all this kind of stuff going on in your life and then you have your husband coming home. And so they kind of categorize it even as either um, you know, you're just a young mom or it's like you're normal because everybody else goes through this, you
Yeah.
know. Now granted, every mom is frazzled at some point in their life, you know, but this was different. This was, you know, this was a feeling and a lifestyle and an action um that that it was almost, oh, how do you even explain this? It was it was something beyond, you know, just being frazzled because, you know, when I think of in those moments, say I'll use an example of when Eric was gone and I had gotten into my routine, you know, because at that moment that was probably the most stable that we ever
Mm-hmm.
were. And so um you know, in those moments when I was frazzled or just a little overwhelmed, those feelings went away after, say, a good talk with my mom, reading in my Bible, you know, talking with some friends, you know, just getting some like a little bit of support every now and then, you know, or even a good night's sleep. You know, both me and my kid would just go to bed. And then the next day it's like you can breathe again, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Whereas this spousal PTSI, it was like a constant weight on our shoulders. It was a constant, you know, feeling of like, well, and like we posted earlier, you know, the things that now that are coming out is a constant weight of, you know, all the anxiety and the depression and the lack of intimacy. You know, it's like constantly on your mind because you feel these things, you have these thoughts, you have these feelings or lack thereof, and you're going, man, I don't know why. Like this is not normal, you know. And then you talk to other, you know, spouses that are probably going through the same thing and they go, oh yeah, I feel that too. And then you go, okay, well, is something really wrong with me because they're going through it too, not even
Right.
realizing that it's probably spousal PTSI for them as well.
Yeah, I remember I always now I look back and I go, it was a state of survival. I was in heightened survival mode every moment. I mean, there was never a time other than like if I was in the safety of my home, I was fine. I could handle even if he came in a little upset. I felt better controlled. I could handle the situation. I would take on the things because I felt like home was my level ground. Like it would be okay, right? And we could hash anything out at home. We could deal with it all at home. And I always felt, I don't know, maybe it was because when he was gone, home was my dominant space. Like that was where I could dominate. And so I felt in control at home. So even if he came home on a bad day and you're like sitting there and you're hyper focusing because that's what it was hyper focusing and anxiety. I would sit there in these two states of I was either anxious to the nines or I would be hyper focusing on every little move. But it's similar to like um I would be hyper focusing on what he would do, like his response, his activity, what he was looking like. I would try to pick up any and all triggers. So at home, that was just like, okay, well, where is he? Where is he? How is he? Like that kind of thing. I noticed it. Mine kicked up when we left the house. I remember I would come home and I would be exhausted. I was just purely done. I mean, energy was sucked from me. It was exhausting. Um, there were many times where we stopped going to festivals because I couldn't do the crowd and him and kids and all of it at once. And I'm like sitting there, I I full on couldn't do it. I asked him at one point in time, I was like, can we stop doing these? I can't do this. Like it would it my whole body would tense the entire time we were there until we got to the comfort of our home. And I would be so exhausted by the time I got home. I couldn't do anything when we got home because I was done.
So did you find that it started kicking up after Chris got out of the military? Like, and you allowed your body to, it started to get out of those survival modes, like because your brain starts to shift, your body starts to shift, right? Where, you get used to, okay, I don't have to always be in that, like, and then sometimes those symptoms get worse before they get better. So did you find that in that transition period, did it really spike or no?
I think it spiked when we hit Colorado. When we
Okay.
got to Colorado, so after he deployed, he was getting ready to get out. Um, I noticed I stopped I stopped asking to go to the festivals and the things. I I would go to them because my kids. So I would always say, I don't want the kids to miss out because of my feelings, because of me. So I would suck it up. I'd go to these things and I would be in misery. I'd be like short fused is a whole new essence. Like I'm usually very calm, cool, collected. I can handle it all. And then we'd go to the festival and I'd be a mess. I don't think I put it all together. There's two instances that pop into my mind. There was a 4th of July fireworks that that was in the Springs, and we were leaving. Chris is in behind me, and I would always walk in front, and he would walk behind, and the kids would walk in between. And this is just the routine we had because I had to be in front so I could pick the triggers up and prepare him before he got to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to have the kids in between us in case anybody would, like, I don't know, I was in this like heightened state. If anybody tried to take my kids, they wandered anything, we could corral them. Like that was the easiest thing is how to think of it. We were leaving and I was on such heightened alert that if I literally didn't have, I had 2 bags on either side of me. I was carrying everything, like our chairs, our bags, our stuff. I think I had like, I don't know, it was something stupid, like stupid amounts of stuff. And I then grabbed kids.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 children in hand with all these bags. Chris is like, please let me take something. And I was like, I cannot. Like, I was shaking at this point. And I'm like, I need to leave. We need to just go. And he's like, give me a kid. And I was like, no, just walk. And he was like, oh my goodness. Like, and he just walked. He didn't fight me. He didn't argue with me. He just let me have the moment, walking with looking like I was out of my mind, insane. And he goes, can I please take a kid at one point in time? And he goes, can I please take something? And I was like, no, just walk. And he was like, okay. We get in the car and I can finally like semi-release for just a second. And he goes, I'm driving home. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm not okay because
Yeah.
I'm trying to, it was just too much. It was too much at once. So I was doing everything I could to control the situation to the best of my abilities. Keeping him behind me was going to be one of the easiest things. I didn't want to feel weak. So I was going to fight until the end on carrying everything. And now I look back and I laugh at it because I'm like, you were ridiculous. People probably, like my own husband probably thought I was going mental. And I couldn't.
But thinking about it, like you said you were at a 4th of July thing, so you already knew that Chris was
Yeah.
doesn't do well at those situations. So then you are on high alert, waiting for him to react however he reacts, right? And so then you're going, we have all this stuff. I have these kids. We're out here away from the car, away from the home. My husband could possibly just freak at any given moment because I don't know what's going to set him off. And so I need to figure this out. I need to control it. I need to keep the kids safe. I need to get everything to the car. We need to get back home, which is all, you're putting it all on you.
Yes.
And so I get the situation. I understand that situation because I lived it with
Yeah.
you. You know what I mean? Um, and hopefully this shows, you know, the seasoned wives out there, if they're experiencing that, they don't know what's going on, that, hey, that's a real thing. That's a real reaction. You know, it is super valid. You are not going crazy, but it's just something that us spouses, that we put all on our shoulders. You know what I mean? So I'm sorry you went through that, but man, that is something that, yeah, does happen, you know?
And the harder part is like, I physically carried the load. Like that moment in that situation, I physically put the weight on my body because in my head, that's what I was already doing. I was already carrying the load. So I might as well physically carry the load of what I was so worried about. So I was doing it already. But I think that, like, why I want to talk about this so much is because I don't want other wives to feel insane like I was. Like, I truly felt like I was going mad. And
Yeah.
it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me. I knew I wasn't okay. Yet, like I said, there couldn't be two of us down. I had to pick up, man up. You know, suck it up, buttercup was kind of the like mentality. And yet I'm sitting here going, the only place I can actually calm down is at home. Anytime we left, I was on just full panic mode. And it was to the point where like I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to like family gatherings were semi decent, but like going out was the worst for me. I had become so introverted that I
Mhm.
wasn't even recognizing myself anymore. I was just I it would be I could either do him or I could do the kids, but I couldn't do both because it would just putting them together would be too much. It was too much. And now I only had two at the time. Now I have four and we go out to public places and I'm like, forget it. If somebody goes mad, then like just everybody stay close. And I've learned, I've healed, I've come through it, I've acknowledged, like, and my husband and I, we have this open communication of, I love you. Maybe this is not the greatest situation, or where are you? Like, where are you at right now? Because neither one of us can be doing this. We can't both go down right now. So it's a constant state of, okay, you've got to, I've got to continue onward and really taking it as a true partnership, not
Yeah.
just, I will carry the load, you mend and deal, we'll figure it out later. Like it had to come to that because I looked at him and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I am miserable. And I think the other instance that pops into my head, we were with my mom and I had a full anxiety attack in the middle of a festival because Chris is at a different booth. I'm seeing my cousin at a different booth and we're talking. And I thought I had a kid with me. And all of a sudden, all four of my kids are by him, but I can't see him or the kids. I go into full on, like, can't breathe, hyperventilating, losing it. And my mom is with us. She's like, I have your children. Like, I have them. Your husband's right here. And literally, he had to look at me and he had to breathe with me. He had to remove us from the crowd, sit in between buildings, get the kids situated to eat. And he had to look at me and goes, you need to breathe. Like, you are not okay right now. And I was like, I am not okay. Like, I'm not okay.
Right.
And I had to work through, but I think out of anything, I want to be an advocate for the other wives who are going through it, who are feeling like, okay, am I okay? Why am I feeling this way? Am I going nuts? I'm just stressed. It's fine. We need to stop sucking it up, buttercup, and manning up. And we need to deal just as much as we want the guys to deal. Like, we want them to be taken care of and get the support and do all the things. But what are we doing for ourselves? Like, who is supporting us when we're supporting them? And
Mhm.
that's what I think I think why we want this podcast to be here is because we want to be supporting to those who are supporting the veterans, right? Like we want that, or the military members, but it's also just this topic is one that I'm like, we need to break the silence.
We have
You
to.
are not going crazy. You are not alone. You are not unhinged. Like you're not. Like I had doctors who thought I was going, like that looked at me and was like, that's not a thing. I was told many times that's not a thing. You just have anxiety. You just have depression. And I was like, and they wanted to hand me prescriptions and tell me to like, you'll be okay. And I'm like, but this isn't okay. Like this isn't right. And so
Mm-hmm.
I want others to speak up, break the silence, and don't allow others, society, doctors, whatever, anyone tell you like, or make you feel less than, because we carry a big load. Like we really, truly do.
Yeah.
But who is taking care of you when you're taking care of them?
Right. Yeah. And I'm really grateful, and like you found that article just this past week, when we were kind of even just doing a little bit more research just to kind of back up what we already experience and what we already know. But they kind of broke it down in a way that I'm going, man, yes, right. Somebody put it into words, with
Yes.
what I'm feeling. And the article broke down the symptoms of, what spouses kind of experience and go through. And the first one is lack of intimacy. Second one is anxiety, depression, and anger. The next one is caregiver syndrome. That's a huge one, at least for me. Secondary traumatic stress, and then isolation. I mean, when I really think back on every time that Eric came home, or I mean, I don't even know if I can pinpoint it anymore. They all kind of run together now. But when I think back on those times where we're reintegrating, or even when he's gone, honestly, when I think about it, like I can talk about every single bullet point here, every single one. And that's not just anxiety, like a doctor will say, that's not just something to mask. And us wives, we need to, if nobody is going to support us because our husbands physically cannot or mentally cannot take on that load, then us wives need to start banding together and supporting each other to
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that, hey, what we're going through, like we're going through it together, so what do we need to do together to help each other? And a lot of it is encouraging each other to seek help. Just like we gently encourage our guys to go talk to a counselor, we need to do that too. And there are a lot of avenues that we can utilize for our own help too, or even if it's just like weekly chats with your friends, like, okay, I'm not okay, like check in with each other. So when I look at this list, even though I can talk about every single one, I mean, a few of them really stand out
Mm-hmm.
more so. And I think for me, if I'm looking at it honestly, the three that stand out for me are the lack of intimacy, the anxiety and depression and anger, and then probably the caregiver burden.
Yeah.
What do you think for
I don't,
yourself?
I don't, I don't think lack of intimacy was ever, Chris is a physical touch. Like that's his love language. So he is like, if anything that got heightened, like lack of intimacy was never like a thing. He would always um come towards me versus run away from me. For him, I was always the space that could remove the anxiety, remove the confusion, would bring him back to reality, and it's just a physical touch thing. So intimacy, I don't feel like ever went away. I mean, there were times where, yeah, like, okay, you're quieter right now. Let me pull you out of this moment. I think the anxiety, depression, and anger were big. Um, Caregiver burden was also big. Um, and then I want to say that secondhand stress, because, or, traumatic stress is probably what kicked in mine, because I truly mirrored all of his issues, like all of, I call them issues, but all of his difficulties. Whenever he had a trigger, I mirrored his trigger. And, like, he didn't like crowds. I didn't like crowds because I couldn't control the crowd, meaning I couldn't control how he would react.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like the bangs and the things like that. I didn't like them because I couldn't control them. Like, it was out of my control. But I think most of mine personally stemmed from more of the caregiver burden, because I felt it was my responsibility to protect him, to be the strong one, to be the rock, to be that for him. And so I feel like that's where I hit what was my big things, because I was very much so, you're on solid ground now, and it's now my responsibility to protect you.
Yeah. I mean, so I also felt like the caregiver burden for me like stemmed even to my kids, you
Oh yeah.
know? So like as much as I was like trying to hold it all together and protect him or shield him or I don't know, make things just, rainbows and butterflies at home instead of actually like dealing and doing the hard things and doing the hard work on
Right.
helping. I was also, you know, stemming it to like my kids and shielding them because I didn't want them to have to see dad, you know, in that rage or the anger whenever he, a trigger happened, So it's like then, my mind is going, okay, how do I do this with my husband? And then how do I do this with my kids? Because, you know, he would get angry at something and then it would always focus on someone, whether
Yeah.
whoever it was. It could have just been the first person in front of him, you know,
Yep.
and he would find something. And so then in my mind, it's like I'm now teetering on this fence of, like protecting or caregiving or I don't know, like both my kids and my husband. And then where's the in the moment, it's almost like I had to pick and choose who am
Yes.
I who am I going to focus on? Who am I going to, try calm down or protect or shield or whatever it may been, And so then it's like all of this over the course of the years, adds like this or added a division between like the three of us in a way. It was like a triangle, because then my husband's going, well, you're not really my partner. And I'm like, that's not true, and I had to like work that situation. And then it's like with my little ones, it's like, well, why did you let him yell at me or, do stuff? I'm like, and so I had to work that situation. It's like there was never a a, a good result, maybe, or a good choice. You
Right.
know, I couldn't, it was like I was stuck between a rock and a hard place,
100%.
and so you just do what you had to do at the time, but then that affected me over the years because it's like the relationships are just kind of torn
Yes.
those
Yeah.
moments. And then the anxiety comes on like every little time you feel that tension happening, like, oh, we're about to have some kind of argument in this house and I don't know why, but it's like I'm looking for my kids. Where are they?
Yep.
I'm looking where my husband is. Like, is he in the vicinity of my
Yep.
kids? I'm like, and I just try to like, kids, why don't you just like go read or go on go put on a show or something. And I'm like trying to already
Yep. Diffuse.
anticipate it and diffuse it so that they're not in the line of fire. I rather put myself in the line of
Yep.
fire, than put my kids there. So so that like already that anxiety that I was dealing with, that probably, and a lot of times nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. Like he, especially later in his career, where you start to kind of like learn and adapt, and then him starting to like learn and heal too. It's like it was like in my mind,
Yeah.
and so it's like, man, I got worked up, or I read the room completely wrong. And then my husband always knew, what is wrong with you? I go,
Yep.
nothing's wrong. Because I didn't want to let him know, even though he knew me better than I knew myself, like, because I didn't want to spark anything.
Right. And you don't want
So,
to step on his toes and get him upset, because then he's going to question whether you trust him and this whole thing. And like, I don't want to ever make it seem like we didn't feel our spouses were great parents, or like that they are bad fathers or anything like that. Like, our guys are incredible dads. Like, I just want to put that out there. We have two incredible husbands who are incredibly awesome with our kids. It was just in the midst of it, when you know that there's going to be this massive explosion, you're just like, I'm going to protect. I'm going to become your shield. I don't know which direction to point right now, but I'm going to shield and be the filter. Like I said before, is that I could do him or I could do the kids, but I couldn't do both. I had to be either protector of my children or I had to protect my husband, but I couldn't protect the two because they were going against each other. Like, they were coming at each other. I had to be the filter. And that's what I've learned I am the filter for, is Chris and my bigs. I am their filter. I
mhm.
have got to be, I mean, the minute I hear his voice raised, I am up. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know who is where. I am finding them. I am searching. I'm listening. And I'm going to put myself physically between him and my children, because
Yep.
he won't go as hard if I'm there. Like, he knows I will pull him back. I will rein him in. And it's not even, I mean, seriously, it might sound like we're saying that our husbands are horrible, but they're not. Like, they are truly, it's just in the moment, it can get more heated than it needs to be. It
Mhm.
can be, it can go from 0 to 100 in seconds. And you have to be able to filter and separate them just so that it doesn't get worse. Like, my bigs don't always bite their tongue. And I've tried to teach this to them. I'm like, sometimes you just need to bite your tongue. Like, I just need you to bite it really hard. Please just stop. And you're like, you're sitting there, like, it would just save the whole situation. But how do you explain to them that it would save, it's hard to explain to them. I mean, that
Well,
whole
and
situation. It's
it's
hard.
hard because they're learning and growing, their brains aren't even developed fully, and they have these feelings, which they probably have child PTSI. That's probably a real thing
Yep.
too. You know what I mean? And you know they're learning even how to control their emotions as well. So this the whole situation, in like Stephanie saying, in that moment, it's just hard. It is so hard because it's gonna, at least in my home, like I had to brace myself, like this is happening. There's
Yeah.
no way I could stop it, but how could I diffuse it, or how could I um go through it in a quick way? How can we get through this the fastest?
Yep.
And because Eric is the type of guy that, when he's there, not even I can get him down. Like, he has to get it out, and then he will work through it himself. And now it's shifting again, like we talked about last week. Things shift a lot,
Mhm.
and we're constantly learning on different ways to approach or different ways to manage or different ways to help, these our guys in these situations. And I think that's even part of our PTSI here, because like our brains are constantly just, all of our receptors are just all off too, and and so it's like there's no way that I could have helped him, and anything that I tried, it was always like it felt like it didn't work. Maybe it did, I don't know. It just, he would tell me one thing: I wish you would just come and like talk to me. But when I try to do that, like he's like, leave me alone. So it's like I don't know how exactly, to give advice on, or on what I did to even go through that, but I can just tell you what my experience of what going through it is like, and what I've been feeling. But um the other thing is like going back to like this list even, and I had mentioned before about even when Eric was gone, you know talk about anxiety, because now the whole house, all my kids, that's on me. My partner is gone, and I remember, sleeping was never a thing. Whenever Eric was gone, I knew that every single night, night times were the worst, because I would be awake. I would be up till 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And luckily, none of my kids were in school at that time, you
Right.
know? And so it's like, okay, once I hit that wall and I just crashed, I could sleep until 10 and 11 o'clock and just bring her into bed with me, pop on like a little, we didn't have iPads back then.
Right.
We had portable DVD players.
Yep.
And so I would have her go get the portable DVD player and the book of DVDs,
Yep.
and she'd be in bed with me watching a show while I'm sleeping finally, because at nighttime, like any little noise, or if she needed me or something, like that was all on me, and like I did not feel, not that I didn't feel safe, but it was just like I didn't want to sleep because I didn't want to not be able to hear her or wake up if anything happened, and so there was so much, I never thought I was an anxious person. I never really dealt with anxiety or depression, that at least that I knew of, because especially in those moments, it was just like, oh, it is what it is. I just do this. It's fine, you know? But looking back like that, that was anxiety, you know?
Oh yeah.
That was
Yeah.
massive anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course,
And
like if
I think I would look back and go, I probably had OCD because I would be the person who'd check the lock 17 times just so that I could sleep. Because
Mhm.
I mean, Abby was hyper. She was on full go. She never took a nap. I could never get that child to nap if I paid that child. She wouldn't nap. And now I have them. My older two are only 19 months apart. So I have a full blown toddler and a child, like I got two little ones that are full send all day long. I didn't have time for a nap. And so I remember going, okay, I need to do whatever I need to do to get me to sleep. And I would purposely, like, I put an alarm system in the house. I made it ding obnoxiously. I purposely would check the locks all these different times. And it was very much so like I probably carried some symptoms of OCD because I was like, no, if I can control the situation, I am fine. I
Mhm.
will fend for myself. Like I kind of did one of those. And so I think I think we need to bring up though the concept of one giving ourselves grace. Is because I feel like if I would have given myself grace a long time ago, I probably could have healed. I probably could have been this wouldn't have hurt as much. It wouldn't have been as high as it was. Um I would have understood what it was.
Yeah.
But the other part is like you said, there's seasons. One season, right after he got home was different than it is now. Now my only thing is trying to be the filter and the diffuser between him and my kids sometimes, where I'm like, cut it. Don't speak right now. Like, just don't speak. And, like sometimes that's my biggest difficulty. We can go out in public. I don't notice the crowds anymore because he's calmed down from the crowds. And so understanding that you're going to go through seasons, and one season might be insanity for you. We both have evidence of that. And then there's going to be another season where it's not going to need as much from you. And just being okay with the fact that you might be in the middle of a transition season. You might be in the middle of this season, but grace and recognition are the two biggest things, is like just giving the grace. And yes, I mean, back then I probably had OCD along with the anxiety, which would then turn into depression because I felt the spiral happening, and then I'd feel bad for being that way and what's wrong with me. I mean, you fall down the rabbit hole from one end to the other, and then you're angry because you're sitting there sad and you're upset, and I mean, it's a spiral, and it's great. But
I mean, I felt that spiral. So I asked you earlier, like, when did you feel all of this set in? So for me, it's a little different. This lifestyle that we lived was obviously, we keep saying, it was a lot longer as compounding, right? So I think like my mindset over the years, I like you said, survival mode. I had years and years and years of living in this survival mode. And, it doesn't take overnight to get out of that.
right.
And so when we moved to Germany, Eric's workload decreased a little bit. I already mentioned this too. Just, I don't I don't know why, but it decreased a little bit. And we started in that's when we started to shift out of work mode and into family life more so. And then when we came home from Germany, we learned that his job that he was going to be working was not even he was going to be in a non-deployable job. So I'm going, yes, right? Finally, like we can, he can start working on himself, start working on his mental health, yada, 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 all that stuff. But I didn't realize that in that time frame as well, I was able to allow myself to really let myself come off of those survival, that survival lifestyle as well. And it probably didn't help that we were coming home from Germany either, because gosh, the culture shock of it all,
right,
is massive. Like I could not talk about anxiety. Like your situation was at a 4th of July event. My situation was every single time I walked into a grocery store. It was too overwhelming for me because in Germany things are smaller, and here you have these big box stores, so many people. Yep. And then on top of that, my situation was a tad bit different. We also flew into a new family. Like we're adopting 2 kids, right? And so my mom had them, flew into Colorado 2 days before we arrived from overseas, and we flew into 2 more kids, and we took them on right then and there. So I had this, now coming off of this compounding lifestyle of survival, but moving into another compounding thing, not necessarily with the military, but when I allowed myself to know, okay, Eric is going to be good, then all the things started flooding in. But I did not allow and read this situation on how hard it was going to be for me with 2 new kids. The culture shock. We moved into a house that was a complete fixer-upper, and we just went. And so it was like a whiplash effect. And come Christmas time, I was like, I didn't even, like you said, you didn't even recognize who you were. I did not even know who I was, and now, like, because I'm allowing myself to just relax in a sense, in a way, all of this stuff started, other things started flooding in that I did not know how to deal with. You
Right.
know, talk about mental breakdown. I had one, you know,
Yep.
and I want to express that, you know, living that lifestyle and then adding in all the other things, because yes, you're a mom, you're a spouse, you deal with all of the other things, like, and
Mhm.
it's little things, little upon little upon little upon little equals something super huge. And once you hit that point, man, like, you cannot do it alone.
Right.
You can't do it alone. And you're gonna, if you don't start recognizing, I wish
Mm.
I had known. Okay, I
Yeah.
keep saying that. I wish I had known, because if I had recognized it sooner, then I could have taken the steps to help myself to not reach that point of complete destruction of myself, you
Yes.
know? And, you know, the destruction of myself rippled into my kids. Like, I, they probably thought, like, what is going on with mom? I'm supposed to be their rock. I'm supposed to be their safe space. You know, that's what I have been all this time. And then, of course, these two new bonus babies, we're 6 months in. They're just learning me. So they're probably going, holy crap, what did we get put into? You know
Can
what I
I
mean?
go now?
Right. And so, like, I just wish I would have known so that I could have taken better care of myself, you know, and taking the time for myself. You know, I always kind of looked at, though, at spouses like who go out weekly, like, oh, me time. And I'm like, oh, like, but you need to be there for your kids. Like, I didn't have that luxury. I didn't allow myself that luxury.
Yes.
Now, do I think every week? To me, I still feel that's a little excessive, but I see the value in, hey, it is okay to go and have some me time. It is okay to pamper yourself, whether it's just going to a park by yourself, reading a book. You know, it's removing yourself from a situation, removing yourself from the things that you carry in life
Mhm.
so that you can recharge,
Yes.
you know, and so that you can be that same person when you come back home. You know,
Right.
when I had my mental breakdown that night, and Eric was wonderful because he's dealt through it. He knows. If
Yeah.
this had happened to me years ago, gosh, could you imagine, he's going through his crap, and then all of a sudden this happens to me, like, we would be both like going crazy. He wouldn't have
Yeah.
known how to help me.
Right.
And so I think that's the beauty also, because our guys have gone through and have been dealing with this stuff. They know how to help us, even though we don't want to go through this. We have that support in those moments when it gets really bad. You know, at least now they're learning how to come alongside us when before they didn't know how.
Right. Well, and I think that there's two things you mentioned. One, guys want to fix things. Like, I don't know, especially mine. He's a fixer.
Yep.
So he wants to know, okay, like we've had this conversation where I'm like, I have to look at him and be like, I need to vent, I need zero fix. Like, I just need you to don't try to fix me. I just need you to just listen, right? And there have been plenty of times where other times I think that they don't know how to, if they can't fix it, they don't know what to do with it. So they look at us and they're like, well, I don't know. Does she need me to fix something? Like, when we're in the full moment of like panic, just like Chris, he's like, let me take something, because he's trying to fix. And the only way to fix in their mindset is to remove the burden, which is in their mind, the physical burden, right? Of let me take this load on. And so they're incredible when you're in the midst of your own moment, because they can be that fixer. They can remove the burden for us, be that partner, be that support. But if we don't let them in, they can't fix, they can't help. But the other part that you mentioned was not realizing all the things that were going on, right? And I think that I had mentioned this too, is that we continue to shove it down. And now I only dealt with one deployment and all the side effects from it, but you had multiple situations, multiple deployments. And so yours continue to be this compounding that just got shoved down, shoved down, shoved down, and you keep pushing it down. And that's why I think we need to break the silence, is because if we continue to push and we push away and push down, eventually there's going to be a point where it all breaks and we don't know what's happening anymore. And we
Hello,
can't
here. That was me.
but we hit that point. We do. We hit a point where we're like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know who I am. I've lost all sanity. Like, and it's not a joke, because I remember in the midst of mine, I was like, my sanity has gone. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I know you felt the same way, where we're both like, okay, off my rocker. I'm done. I'm cashed. But if we continue to push it down, we cannot deal with it. And so, and it will come, and whether it's coming in the form of onto the kids, onto our spouse, onto others. And I think one of my big things was how important you're saying, like, okay, the weekly, time out, right? The weekly time for you. I don't know if, like you said, I never allowed myself the luxury, because I need to be 24/7 everybody's caregiver. Yeah. And if I step away, the world will end if I step away. Like, if I go away, what's to say this house is going to be ablaze by the time I get back, right? Like, that was truly my mindset. And I didn't give myself that luxury. But I also think, and we've brought up this topic and we'll have an episode over it, is the importance of that 2 a.m. friend. Mm-hmm. How important those people are. The ones that are your ride or dies, the ones that are going to be there for the not pretty crying, the not pretty moments. That's going to be the people that you need to lean into, because they're there for it. They want to be there for it. They want to be the thing that pulls you out in some of your darkest moments. And it's hard to acknowledge that it's dark. It's hard to acknowledge that we carry this burden, because nobody talks about it. I mean, the military sure doesn't put us in a class to teach us that, hi, you've got issues. Like, they're not bringing up these kinds of things. And so, when you feel very isolated, you don't want to talk about it. And yet we are the ones and the biggest advocates who tell our husbands and spouses, like, you need to talk about it. But right. Are we talking about it? Are we having that 2 a.m. friend call where you're just like, I'm not okay?
But again, it just brings up, like, we're the advocate for our guys, and we're not taking that we're not taking our own advice, right? Practice what you preach. But it brings up again that we didn't even know.
Right.
We don't. And I think a lot of military spouses still don't. This is such a new development that is starting to come out, that they don't even know that what they're dealing with is post-traumatic stress injury. Like, that our brains are injured from our guys' traumatic events that they bring home. And so what they deal with affects us, and we're affected by it. It's traumatic for us with what we're dealing with. And we just, it was so unknown,
Right.
The other part, I mean, I don't know about you. Well, you said before it didn't really affect you, but I'm going to bring up the lack of intimacy, because for me, that's honestly been a big one. Now, for one, I think everybody knows that marriage in general, the two main things that spouses or couples fight about is sex and money, right?
Yep.
And so already those things are hot topics for for things that continue to have an argument. Now, add in the trauma that my husband went through and then brings home. And, for me, lack of intimacy was a big one. And, or, honestly, I'll say it still is, because I'm still kind of working through this on how to be intimate with my husband. And because for a long time he would come home, and because he'd be different, it wasn't like the same man that left. So it's almost like you you don't know this person that you're supposed to be intimate with. How
Mm.
can I trust? How can I open up and be
Mhm.
vulnerable in those most intimate moments with somebody that I technically don't know anymore? I know your face, I know your name, I see your body, but this vibe we got going on, this communication we got going, even though we're communicating, like, we're not connecting, you
Right.
know? And I would me this how I reacted to it is I would build up a wall to protect myself in those
Right.
vulnerable moments, because I didn't want to be hurt, you know?
Right.
And he would always say, something's wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. Like, this isn't normal. Like, other wives would, or other women, you could, I could go out and get any woman and she'd be happy to be with me. I'm like, you probably could, but like, it not doesn't change the fact that I like, not that I'm not attracted to him, or not that I wasn't attracted to him. I still totally am. But man, it was like I couldn't allow myself to open up a lot of times. It took a long time, and even now, like, sometimes I revert back to my old self. It's like, because it's just like you get in, especially after, like, you're just not connecting, like, because of all the different times he came home, and all the different times he was different, all
Mm.
the different times. I think last week we talked about their memory shifting and changing, that
Mhm.
causes me, like, that never happened before. And then we argue, like, what are you talking about? You think I'm crazy? I can't even remember my own stuff, or memories. And so then it puts, like, this, pressure on me, like, am I going crazy? Am I not remembering? And then it's like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know who this man is. And the intimacy was just, it just wasn't there, and I'm not just talking about in the bedroom. Like, even if we're
No.
just, together, like, I couldn't even open up hardly, because what
Mm.
I remembered and what I knew was not the same as what he remembered anymore, or who he
Mhm.
was. So it's like we're
Right.
constantly in this rotation of relearning each other. And they say, oh, it's like a honeymoon all over again. And I'm like, granted,
Mm.
yeah, but,
No.
like, you still have there's still life in between, you know there's still conversations and lack thereof that you
Right.
need to be having, or you're not having. And then, what is it? Isolation. I isolated myself because I rather stay quiet, you know,
Right.
than bring it
Hmm.
up, and then have this argument, like, of what, like, hey, no, like, you were never like this. You did, like, that's not the memory that I remember, and so I isolated myself. I became a doormat for a long time, you
Hmm.
know because it was easier to stay quiet and let him get away with everything, and let him do whatever he wanted, than it was to have a fight.
Yes.
And again, that's not healthy. I want to let you guys know, if you guys are in that moment where you are just letting your husbands do everything because it's easier to not fight with them
Right.
than to actually have the hard conversations and do the work, that is not healthy. And believe me, I was there, and I have major consequences from it. Like, our relationship was torn and battered because I allowed that in my marriage.
Hmm.
But it was because of my anxiety and anger, and I wouldn't say depression at the time, but a lot of isolation and anxiety that I allowed myself to get into because it was just easy, you know.
Hmm.
So, the lack of intimacy was a major one because of all that.
I think you're very right on the isolation conversation, though, because, you know, we will sit here and we go, okay, well, it's like, I don't know, it's like walking up to an IED. You're in a landmine. You don't know what you're going to step on. You don't know what conversation you're like, what conversation could spark it, what look could start it. And yet, so now you're sitting here living in a constant state of like walking around a landmine. You don't know what's going to blow up in your face. So it's easier just to not move at all and
Yeah.
just chill right where you're at, because at least you know it's safe, right? You know it's not going to blow up if you just stay quiet and you don't do and you just deal. um it's better, it's easier, it's all the things. But I mean, I sat there too. I did that same thing. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Go for it. Whatever makes you happy, honey. Like, yeah, okay, okay, okay. And I just I joke around and I'm like, I became a bobblehead where I just kind of, yep, yep, sure, honey. And I kept doing that because I didn't want to start the fight. I didn't want to. And finally, it got to a point where I was like, no, I need to fight. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
fight. Enough is enough because I can't be doing this.
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, money and sex are two important things. Like they're hot topics. Our paychecks aren't that great. Like we, at least when we were in, they aren't great paychecks. Like they
They're
just
still
weren't.
not that great.
I mean, yeah, you can survive barely off of it, but it's one of those. So now you're already one down. Now you're going to try and deal with this intimacy of like just the fact of it. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't mean the bedroom. It can just be like, where are you in the room? Are you even, do you hold my hand? Do you give me a hug? Do you want to be near me? Um, I remember when I was going through it at my worst, Chris was struggling because, like I said, the physical touch is his thing. And so, with me pulling back and going into that isolation mode, um, I wasn't very physical towards him. I didn't want to be near him because I didn't want to set him off. I was trying so hard to not touch and not be that he would get angry because I wasn't what
Yes.
he wanted it enough. Like he wanted more and I wasn't willing to give it to him. And I was like, I am dealing with, my brain hurts. Like my body hurts from holding all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of conversation. I mean, a lot of tears and conversations and hard conversations because I think we put up the statistic. Only 30% of marriages that have PT or that involve PTSI survive. We
Mm-hmm.
don't even have a 50% chance of surviving this moment. We got 30%. That is not even like, I wouldn't put money on it if I was a betting type of person, which I'm not, but I wouldn't bet on 30% odds.
Right.
No. And now I'm trying to like survive it. Like I'm just trying to survive. Like that's what we were in. And I think, though, as much as the conversations are hard, as much as they are difficult to have and we don't want to have them and you're afraid of the bomb blowing up in your face, I looked at it and went, I either have the hard conversation or I have to split my family up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to split my family up. Like that is not even an option in our world. We both vowed when we got married that we would never divorce. Like that was not even going to be a thing for us. It
Mm-hmm.
is, we work this out, end of conversation. Like that was our end all. Like we didn't have that. We both vowed, coming from both of us having divorced parents, we said there we would never divorce. So suck it up. We're dealing with this. And so I learned quickly that I had to speak up. I had to be open and honest and tell him and have those tough conversations. I had to tell him, you're being ridiculous. But he also had to come to me and be like, you're losing it. Give me,
Right.
like, there's been many times where he has faced the fury of me because I was ready to go to blows with him. And he's had to come up to me and be like, as gentle as he could, just be like, I love you. So give it to me. Like, give me the burden, give me the thing so you can go take 2 seconds and come back. And as much as it was hard, as much as it was hard to admit that I wasn't okay, as hard as it was to admit that there was something wrong, admitting it was probably the hardest thing, but the best thing, because then I can turn around and go, okay, now I can deal with it. I'm not going crazy. I'm not this. I don't have to sit here and second guess. Whether a doctor tells me or not, I know I'm facing this issue. So now how do I deal with it? I'm not going to shove it down anymore. I'm not going to, question my own sanity or question myself. I know what's going on. And having the friends that I do and did, especially at the time, who were very supportive of like, you need to do this for you then if you feel like that's wrong, like something's going on, then you need to figure out you. And we're very supportive, but it takes admitting and then having those hard conversations because it's needed.
Yeah, and I just encourage all of you spouses, and the young spouses, the ones that are just coming in. I have a niece. She's a brand new military spouse. Her and her husband just got married almost 3 years ago. He's on his first deployment, and you know, she's probably not the one that we're talking to because, well, in a sense of her relating, because she does not know, and
Right.
not yet. And
Yep. She's not.
but maybe if you young spouses are still listening, this will give you some kind of insight, because again, I wish I knew. And so it'll
Yeah.
give you some like, oh, okay, what to expect, maybe to have it in the back of your mind that if you start feeling these kind of things, that you can have the tools to go seek help, things like that. But also for us seasoned spouses, or spouses that have been in the military for a little while, maybe had 1-2 deployments under your belt, or traumatic events, that if you are dealing with this, you are not alone. But I what you said is like, oh gosh, where's my thoughts here? Like I said, my brain this morning is just not working. I just I don't want you guys, or if you guys are in that moment of letting them get away with everything, like Stephanie said, you need to start having those conversations. You have to get to a point. Don't allow yourself and your marriage to completely deteriorate in
Right.
front of you because you're not willing to be courageous to
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations. And it does take courage. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have the courage to admit, like Stephanie's saying, that there's an issue, I have a problem, or something,
Correct.
not a problem, I have a challenge.
Yep.
And we have challenges. And it I encourage you guys to be courageous in those moments. It takes a lot of courage,
It
a
does.
lot of courage. And I'm living proof that I had to admit it finally, but because for one, it wasn't hiding anymore. It was completely out in the open. Again, mental breakdown, lost my mind. I was like just absolutely going insane. And
Mm.
so I couldn't hide it, and I had to admit it, like, I need help. And
Yes.
then the next step of figuring out how, that takes courage too, because there is a stigma. There is a stigma about going about mental health and talking to counselors or therapists, and um that takes a lot of courage to make that call,
Yes.
or to reach out to somebody, maybe not a counselor or therapist, but to somebody to admit, I'm going through this. It's now not admitting it to myself, but publicly opening it up to
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. And so it be courageous, because those steps forward, although hard,
Yeah.
are going to benefit you way more than you think. Like I said, my husband at the time, because we just moved here, we had just moved here, I didn't have the 2 a.m. friend.
Yeah.
I didn't have my friends here, and I'm actually still working on it, because it takes a long time for me to find friends. Um, but my husband became that for me. He stepped up. He'd already been going to a counselor. He'd already been making steps to heal. So he, in that moment, was able to come along and support me in that moment. He would not have been able to do that before he started making these steps of healing, you know, but he did. And he told me, you need to talk to somebody. You need to seek help. You need to go talk to a counselor. He goes, I've been talking. I see the benefit. Go and talk to somebody. He kicked me out of the house. Not what you think, not in a mean way, but he goes, I got the kids. They are fine. You go. And he kicked
Yep.
me out of the house. He's like, go have dinner by yourself. And I'm like, that's weird. And it really was. I did it, but it was really awkward. It's the first time I ever went and had dinner alone at a restaurant, you know. And I went to the chiropractor. I went shopping. He goes, go get stuff for yourself. Do not buy things for the kids. Don't buy things for, me. Don't buy groceries. He goes, go do something for you. And he allowed me to have that time to really just digress. But I did go and talk to a counselor. And it took
Mm-hmm.
me a couple weeks to even make that call, because then
Yeah.
it wasn't just something that me and my husband knew quietly in our home. It was putting it out there to the public, and that's hard to do. That is very
Oh
hard to
yeah.
do. But man, I felt so much relief after I actually did it. I felt
Mm-hmm.
so much peace after I did that. And I continued to go for a little while. And so be courageous, be brave, you know, everybody, I want you guys to know you can do hard things. You can do
Yeah.
those things. You are completely
Yeah.
capable of it. Every single one of everybody. So
Oh,
don't be afraid to do it.
yeah. And like you're saying, yes, the comfort of your home is one thing. Like, okay, it's between me and him. He signed up for this. Welcome to the crazy show. You signed up for this. Hi and welcome. I always feel like you signed up for it. That's you knew what you were getting into when you married this crazy train. So welcome. But having to admit outwardly needing help is hard. I know when Chris was in, I wasn't going to seek help because I was afraid that chain of command would hear and that it would punish him. He would lose promotions. He'd lose this, that, the pay, the things. Oh my gosh, chain of command's going to take my kids, going to take me away, put me on all these. Like, I was so worried about chain of command and everything else. And then I had to stop worrying about that. You can't
Mhm.
think of chain of command. You can't think of anyone else other than if you stay silent, who does that hurt? Everyone. So you need to speak up. You need to be there and be an advocate for yourself and speak up. And you know what? If somebody doesn't like it, then that's their own prerogative. But this is a chance to, like you said, is learn yourself again. You have to be able to learn who are you, not the military spouse you, not the caregiver you, not the wife, not the mom, but who are you? Because when you can find you, and the minute I started learning who I am, right, I knew I was capable of handling hard things because I mean, look at my life. It wasn't easy, yet I dealt with it all. Look at all the things. I can do incredible things. So going to dinner by myself shouldn't be that hard if I can handle being in a foreign country for a year alone. What's a dinner? An
That's
hour?
so true.
Like
It just
I
makes
had,
you're just in such a vulnerable state at that time,
yes,
which
yes,
that's what makes it hard. That's the part
yes.
that makes it hard.
But it's so good though, because then you have to look at yourself and be like, what am I panicking right now for? Like, I
Yes.
remember Chris sending me out before and being like, go do this. And I was like, I I don't know how to do this. What am I doing? And he's like, just go out for a little while. And I was like,
Right.
and he's like, I don't care. And I was like, what? Like, I don't. And I was like sitting there confused. And he's like, what is so hard about this? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to do anything. You know what I mean? And you're like, in that moment, you're like, I don't know because I've been in survival or being just doing dealing. I always said I was just dealing. I didn't have any other choice. I just dealt with it. And I made the best of what I dealt with. You know, I made the best of a not so great situation and kept moving. And he's like, well, then make the best of an awkward situation and go have dinner. And I was like, okay, this is weird.
So
And you
weird.
just kind of start rolling with it. But you learn so much about yourself because in the midst of the quiet, in the midst of being vulnerable, you can see just how powerful you've been because you've been in survival. You've been in that state of survive and deal and cope. And now you get a moment to actually look back at yourself and be like, I did that.
Yeah.
I lived there. I did this thing. I dealt with this. Look at me and be proud of you. But don't worry about the outside world. Don't worry about the chain of command. Don't worry about, anybody saying anything. And if they got something to say, they're not the people that you need in your corner. Like that's what I kind of learned after a while was that I was like, if somebody's got something to say about it, they can first off, they can come live my life for half a second, or they can they're just not meant for my circle. Like, because it's either going to be a support and love thing or it's not. But if it's not, then I don't know what to tell you. But that's the difference. Is if somebody's got something to say, they're not meant to be there. They're not what you want in your.
I love that. And I can't speak for the conventional military. I can't speak for that side of it about the chain of command because I've heard about that several times. Like the women going like our husbands will be affected if we start messing up, right? And you know
You do.
does that show the lack of leadership? Absolutely, because to me that does not, like, we are not, I am not him. I am not that's his career. I am just married to the man. And so, that was a big thing for me of I never wore his rank. I never made it to where like his job was my job. And like that is his side of the house. Yes. Are we a military family? Absolutely. But what he does at work, that's him, right? And so I never understood the rumors or the ideas that could happen on that side of the house. I never heard of it actually happening, so I would like to say it's a misconception. However, what I experienced being on in the soft community with Eric being a Green Beret, like that doesn't happen, you know. So if the wives ever needed to get help, if something ever happened to a wife, it never affected our guys, and they like they the command was able to separate the two. Like that was, they always had, again, at work they were on a mission mindset. We're not part of that mission, you know. And so I would like to say it's a misconception just by what I experienced, that it will not affect your husband's command to seek help. So go do it. Go do it. don't worry
Right.
about all of that kind of stuff. And the other thing, what did you just say? Oh my gosh, my brain.
Learning about yourself again.
Oh gosh, dang. Um, oh, I think you're on the right track. Be honest with yourself in those moments when you do go and have some me time, really dig down deep and be honest. Like, you may not know who you are, but you know what you're feeling, so be honest with yourself, because once you're honest even with yourself, then you can start progressing and figuring out, hopefully, avenues of how you are going to approach your healing and your progression as just a human being. Like, for me, I knew with what I was dealing with, I was not in God's word like I needed to be. That's me personally. So I knew I needed to add that in, that was
Yes.
something that I personally made the choice of. And then, of course, I need my other avenues is, yes, Eric's right. I've seen the benefit of counseling with him and how it's helping him. So yeah, that's something I'm going to choose, even though that was hard. So be honest with yourself and what you're feeling, so that way you're able to really get a good idea of how you're going to approach your situation.
Yes. So I I think we've given so much information. I mean, yes, like you said, maybe this isn't for those brand new spouses, or, the ones that are just entering the military only a little bit in. This might be more of a message to those seasoned wives, those who've been in for a little while, seen a few things, or the ones that are just dealing, is that we want you to feel the love and support. We want you to know that you are not alone. You are not going crazy. That this is unfortunately a side effect of our job, if you will, our title, if you will, that nobody talks about. We talk about how the guys are going to have the PTSD, the side effects, all the things that they get when they come home. But we're here to remind you that, this is also a part of it, and that it's okay to deal with it. It's okay to admit, and you're not alone. But we want to show love. We want to break the silence and just let you know it's okay. You're okay. It will get better. Find your people, find yourself, and know that it's going to be okay. And so we want to thank you guys for being here and listening to this. Just, if you know somebody who might be in the midst of this, a spouse that could probably benefit from this, share this with them, because I think that the more we can share, the more we can support. Maybe this isn't ideally for you and you're like, okay, not for me, but it'd be great for so-and-so. Share it out with them so that they can get some, reap the benefits of this amazing episode, just because I think it needs to be spoken about more. But make sure you're also following the podcast, because guess what, guys? There's new episodes coming all the time. And we have so many more fun episodes coming. I promise we're going to go lighter next week. We've even said we've had some big weeks. We want to go a little bit lighter, and we want to talk about some of the joys of the military life. Coming up next week. So make sure that if you are not following along with us, you are following along now. So go ahead and follow along both wherever you're listening, and make sure that you got your notifications on so that you can be up to the know with what's going on, and be ready for next week's episode, because we're talking all the fun and joys of military life, because there are more joys than there are downers, I promise. And so thank you again, Ash, for being here and all your wonderful insights. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to be with you.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Follow along, and we will talk to you next week.